Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I'm honored to have Kenyon Murray with me. Kenyon is an Iowa Hawkeye basketball standout legend. In addition, he is the owner of Murray Legacy Management. And today, with his story, one of the things I'm really excited to highlight is just how your life experiences can be passed down to your kiddos. And so, as we learn about his story and his kids' success, you'll certainly understand that. So, Kenyon, thanks so much for being on today, my man.
No, I'm excited. Thanks for the invite. Always happy to jump on somebody else's podcast and get away from doing my own. So
Yes. By the way, go check out Kenyon's podcast. He's had a bunch of great individuals on there, and he's got a fun one where he kind of updates about two of his sons that are playing in the NBA and just kind of where they're at. So check out his podcast.
yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it.
Yes. So to start your story, grew up in Michigan and, really found a love for basketball. So talk a little bit about, getting excited about playing basketball and, if that was something like your parents passed on to you, if it was just playing with friends in the neighborhood or how the love of basketball came to be in your life.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting because I really didn't get serious about the game until about eighth grade. And like you said, you grew up playing in the neighborhood. Actually, I was born in Columbia, South Carolina. I lived
Okay.
there until my mom remarried and we moved to Battle Creek, Michigan. That's kind of where, obviously I grew up there, went to high school there. But as far as the basketball thing, I was more locked into academics and art and music. I actually played classical viola for 7 years, and so
Wow.
that was kind of my first love. But I would play basketball in the neighborhood and that kind of stuff. Just never really thought it as something as that I would do. I actually love football more, but my mom wouldn't sign a permission slip for me to play football in high school. So I was like, okay, well, I'll figure something out. And I was just playing in gym class one day, and the gym teacher, who was one of the basketball coaches, like, hey, you should think about going out. And that's really kind of how it started. And I missed he came to me in seventh grade, but I missed that season because I had a hernia had to get repaired. So I was out for that. And then the next summer, I snapped my ankle in
Uh,
like October playing outside, playing basketball. And so I was in a cast and whatever, and really didn't get ramped up until November. But once November hit as an eighth grader, I just kind of took to the game, and really that's where the love started. I didn't have anybody passing it down to me. It was just something to keep me busy at the time, but basketball really kind of helped me find myself because I was kind of a shy and introverted kid. So basketball
yeah.
really helped me find myself and give me a voice. And I think that's where a lot of my transformation happened, was in that eighth grade year.
Yeah, well, I love that you point that out. And I think so frequently, especially as a kid, and you mentioned, hey, you moved from South Carolina to Michigan. And, I think it's a human need to feel, wanted and to, have a certain amount of attention. And it can be tough when you're the new kid and you're like, well, gosh, how do I gain friends? And fortunately, sports can be that great equalizer, right? Like you don't have to be the funniest kid, you don't have to be the smartest kid if you're good at sports, someone's going to invite you to be on their team. So oftentimes that can open up doors to friends and new connections too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what it was. We had a neighborhood there was a lot of kids. We'd play touch football in the streets. We go to the churchyard, play tackle football, those kind of things. It's interesting now. We try to get kids out of the house
Yeah,
and hated being in the house growing up, right? We were,
yeah,
didn't matter if we were playing in the dirt or playing basketball or whatever. We were just always outside and didn't want to come home. But it did. It really helped me. Like I said, I was shy, kind of moving into a new place, and sports did really help. But it was just kind of that camaraderie that I found in the
yeah.
neighborhood with a bunch of kids outside doing kid-like stuff, riding bikes and building forts and those kind of things. So I did have a pretty good group of kids that I grew up with once we did move to Michigan.
I love it. Now, in a very short amount of time, you go from kind of playing basketball as a passion to by senior year, you're Mr. Basketball in the state of Michigan. That's a very impressive feat, regardless of the year that you're doing it. I mean, the fact that you're one of the arguably best 50 kids in the entire country is great. So Talk a little bit about the progression for you. Was there a season where all of a sudden it just clicked, or were you, I mean, I know you said, hey, eighth grade is when I really started taking it seriously, but
Yeah.
what about that really made you that motivated to push yourself to that extent?
Uh, Man, let's say me going 1 for 9 from the free throw line in the eighth grade city championship was really kind of the catalyst for my locked in focus and wanting to be the best player that I could be.
Yeah.
I was pretty, I was pretty athletic. I could run, I could jump. I didn't have a really good shot, so I played center. In eighth grade, I was about 6'3" ish or so, and so I was playing center, just really raw. Like I just played hard, but my skill set wasn't very good, and I really couldn't shoot. So that summer was getting up 8 o'clock in the morning, going to the playground, working out by myself, and waiting around for these 30 and 40-year-old dudes to get off of work so I could play against them, right? And
Yeah.
it was kind of cool because I kept coming back. They would knock me to the ground, I get back up, I call a foul, they wouldn't count it. So I really had to earn everything I got on the playground. And what they saw is like, man, this kid keeps coming back, keeps coming back. We knock him down, he comes back. And so these older guys really started pouring into me, and that really led to the jump that I had from eighth grade to ninth grade year, and obviously going into high school, that was pivotal. And I had a really good ninth grade team. Our starting point guard was David Hardy, was a 6'5" point guard, ended up playing at Michigan State. He and I played together all 4 years in high school, and having him was awesome for us too. And I think we went 13-0 as freshmen. And, that was really, really good because I was all conference and that kind of stuff. So it was just that year was where I really saw it. But then I had to figure, okay, am I going to play JV in high school? Am I going to play varsity in high school? And so that ninth grade year really kind of set the stage for everything that happened once I got to the varsity level as a sophomore.
Now, you talk about your friend and teammate that also was really good and ends up playing Division One. And I think, when you're wanting to get the best out of yourself, it can be super helpful to have that person that is probably pushing themselves equally as hard. And there's a level of competition that can be there. But I think you also have to be in a mindset of like humility and humbleness where you can say, it's it's not a zero sum game, right? If he does well, it doesn't mean I didn't do well. And I think a lot of people can get trapped in the comparison to a teammate when really it could be a great opportunity to push yourself and become better because you're getting to be, alongside someone that's really good as well. But talk a little bit about that for you and just the competitive side for, what you guys were able to do and, push yourselves to, where you ended up going.
Yeah, I think the one thing about Battle Creek Central is that we were one of the best teams in the state when it came to basketball. I mean, we had unbelievable players come through, and I actually, some people consider me the best player to ever come out of Battle Creek just because of the accolades I got. I don't
Yeah.
think I was the most talented player to come out of there. I think I played with one of, if not the best player to ever come out of Battle Creek Central. His name was Mark White, and he was a senior my sophomore year, and so over that summer, after we finished up the freshman year, that summer we myself and my friend David, we were told that we were going to play varsity as sophomore. So we got to go over and start working out with the varsity team. And so we had this unbelievable tradition of phenomenal players. We had an unbelievable Hall of Fame coach. His name was Chuck Turner. We had a great staff. And so the one thing that we would do was there would be players that graduated, say, a year or two, and maybe they were playing at Central Michigan or Eastern Michigan or Western Michigan, but they'd come back to Battle Creek on the weekends and we would play. And it would always be the current players versus the former players. And you
Yeah.
talk about a gym where competition was high. It was really, you talk about the competition in there. It was you had to compete. You had to learn how to win. You had to learn how to be tough because these college guys weren't giving us anything.
Yeah.
And so I think where the competition became really good was the fact that we always had these guys pushing us, and there was a pride about playing for Battle Creek Central. And
Yeah.
that was the thing that really drove us. It was like, we can't look at these guys that have, laid the path for us and then not live up to what they did. And so that was a big part of it. But like I said, Coach Turner, he believed in me from day one. He was a massive man. He was like 6'8", almost 6'8", like 300 pounds, but he was the biggest teddy bear. He's from Paducah, Kentucky, and he was one of those coaches that just poured everything into his players,
Mhm.
and he really took me under his wing. And um, I think at times he wanted the success more than I did, and he
Mhm.
would push me and do things because he saw something in me. Coach Fred Jones and Coach Greg Williams, two of the assistant coaches, were always pushing us too. So there was always that air of competition, but I think it pushed us all to be really great. And I can say that I played with in my 3 years of varsity, I probably played with 9 Division I players, and a
Wow.
handful of Division II players, and so it was, and not just basketball. There were some Division I football players in there too. So it was just this pride we had of pushing each other to be the best versions of themselves. And some people may say I was maybe the most successful coming out of there, but there was just a ton of guys that laid the path and set the foundation of what I knew I had to be if I was going to
Yeah.
wear the blue and gold of Battle Creek Central.
Absolutely. So to piggyback off of that, if you're Mr. Basketball in the state of Michigan, one might think you'd go put the blue and the gold or the green and the white on, and you not only didn't go to either of those schools, but you stayed in the conference. So talk a little bit about, picking Iowa and what led to that.
Yeah, when you're a top 20 player and you're a McDonald's All-American and all these kind of things are coming, obviously, you've got the in-state schools, and Michigan and Michigan State have been recruiting me since about my sophomore year. Had a really great relationship with Brian Dutcher, who was on Steve Fisher's staff and is still the head coach at San Diego State. And Tom Izzo was an assistant at Michigan State under Heath Coach. So I've known these guys for so long. And part of it was, at Michigan they had the Fab Five, and
Yep.
granted, they were very talented, but as a top player in the country, I'm thinking I'm coming in here to play, right? I'm not
Right.
coming in here to sit. And so you think about it, I played the same position as a couple of the guys in that Fab Five. So I'm thinking, okay, there's already set. Rob Pelinka was there as a senior, and I'm thinking these guys are playing the same position. And so I obviously wanted to go somewhere where I knew I had an opportunity to earn a starting job. And Michigan State were, two of my final five schools, and Notre Dame and Kentucky were also there. Uh, and Iowa was just, it was such a good fit because of the style of play, the fact that they were graduating a couple seniors that played the small forward position or shooting guard position, which is what I was going to come and play. So that factored in. But honestly, a lot of Iowa people will understand this is probably the icing on the cake that sealed it for me was the opportunity to play with Chris Street. And Chris Street he took me under his wing, not only on my visit, but once I got to campus in the fall, and he became my best friend. And obviously, it was a tragic story in how he died in a car accident. But really, Iowa just had everything. They had the opportunity for me to earn a starting job. It also had a style of play that I was accustomed to because we were a fast break pressing team in high school, and that's what I want to do. So I'm like, okay, I can come in. Granted, there's a lot of things I have to learn, but I feel comfortable being able to slide in defensively and be able to play at that level. And that's really what I became at Iowa. I was a prolific scorer coming out of high school, but when I got to Iowa, it became down to being a defensive specialist. But it really was a lot of little things like that, and just a comfort. I always wanted to play in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
When Michigan won the national title in '89, and I watched Glenn Rice and Ramil Robinson, I was like, I want to play for Michigan. Go Blue. But
Yeah.
then as you get into the recruiting, things change and that kind of stuff. So Iowa just offered an opportunity for me to one, stay in the Big Ten Conference, which I loved and always wanted to play in. It was far enough from home where I could get home if I needed to, or my parents could get out and see me, but it was further enough away where I had, some newfound independence. And so, and then I've been here ever since. I still, we've lived in this house for 20 years, and I've been in Iowa, over 32 years. So it's been very, very good to me, and wouldn't change a thing.
Well, so in your time at Iowa, I think anyone that played collegiate sports knows that there's this jump, right? To going from being 18 years old playing against 14 years old to now being 18 years old playing against depending on how many, red shirts we got, 23, 24-year-old men,
Yeah.
I'm sure the days of playing against the 30 and 40-year-olds back, in eighth grade prepped you for that well. But talk a little about just, getting acclimated, even as a McDonald's All-American, there's just that change of, play when it's everyone's, 4 or 5 years wiser, the game's moving at a different speed for everybody opposed to just one person. So talk a little about that and getting acclimated for you there.
Yeah, I think the toughest thing, I mean, during the summer when we came in, probably the biggest adjustment was just the conditioning and weightlifting, right? It's just a completely
Yeah.
different level. I was known as an athlete, so I remember my first time trying to dunk on somebody that first summer. Got met with a pretty hard foul and a comment of "You're not in high school anymore." And so there was a little bit of hit to the ego, but
Yeah.
um, I felt really good. I think coming into Iowa, we had a really veteran team when you had guys like Chris Street, Wade Looking Bill, AC Earl, Val Barnes. I mean, we had a really good crew of older vets. And so that was a big help. But I think the biggest transition for me was just the academic part of it. I was a really good student, but I really didn't have to work too hard. And as far
Yeah.
as studying, I was, pretty naturally gifted that way. So that was probably the biggest thing. I was like, I might have been teetering on academic ineligibility the way it was going. But I think that was one of the biggest things because now you have to manage your time. And that was just something
Yeah.
that I really didn't do well in high school. It was like, I don't need to study. I can do that. I'd rather be in the gym working out.
No.
But that was a big adjustment for me was just the academic part of it and then just managing my time. And Kris really helped me with that, especially when I was struggling early in the fall of 92, my freshman year. He would, lock me in, he'd pick me up and take me to extra workouts. He also, if I was getting homesick, we'd jump in his car and we'd go to Indianola or whatever to watch his sister, usually if Sarah play volleyball and hang out. And so I was, kind of his little brother. So,
Yeah.
the biggest adjustment for me was just understanding that I was one of 15. I
Mm.
wasn't the man. And
Yeah.
even if you had a really good day, that still didn't mean that the next day you're going to start or the next day you're going to have the same thing. So trying to figure out the ups and downs and not allow myself from an emotional standpoint get too high or too low, that's something that I struggle with. And that's one thing that probably has definitely allowed my boys to have the success that they've had is the fact that they don't let their emotions go like
Yeah.
that. So they stay pretty calm. But yeah, man, it was just the transition of newfound independence, tougher academics, and then just the physical toll that playing college basketball can have on you because, we did two-a-days back in
Yeah.
92. Like we started, it was 8 a.m. practice, 5 p.m. practice. I mean, we did
Oh.
it twice a day. So that was crazy.
Now, in your time there, you guys beat the Fab Five. And I'm sure that's one that you had circled, squared, starred on the calendar going into the year. But talk a little about that, that game. I mean, obviously, Fab Five, I mean, they had, the target on their back every night. And you guys were no slouch of a team, right? But
Right.
it always carries a little bit more, I'm sure, when, you got recruited by the team and now you're playing against them.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was probably the worst case scenario for the Fab Five to be coming in the Carver Hawkeye, after, we're about 2.5, almost 3 weeks out from when Kris passed. And we played Michigan State on the road the game before, and we were down 13 points with like a minute and a half to go. And we had this furious comeback and ended up beating Michigan State by 8 in overtime. It was unbelievable. I mean, you talk about having a guardian angel on your shoulder. Yeah, he was big time that night after we hadn't practiced for 2 weeks. It was crazy. But Carver was rocking. I think still to this day, that's a game that lives in infamy, right? Like everybody remembers that game, whether they were there, they watched it, the crowd was electric. And, Michigan came in, I think they were a top five team at that point in time. And we were ranked too, but it was just the energy. It was one of those things like we couldn't lose that game. And obviously for me, it was very personal. And there was a lot of trash talking going on from the Michigan side. But in the end, it was one of my best games that year as a freshman. Played really well. We got the win. The streets were on the court. They were courtside, and to be able to present them with their game ball after that win was just big time because we knew how good Michigan State was, or sorry, we knew how good Michigan was in a Fab Five, and obviously Chris Webber, #1 pick, Juwan Howard, top 5 pick, Jalen Rose, top 5 pick, like they were loaded, and so it was a tremendous win for us, but more than anything, we wanted to win the game for the streets. It
Yeah.
was like I said, the air was taken out of the state when Kris died, and to be able to have that moment that day on CBS with Jim Nance and Billy Packard was awesome.
I love it. Now, for you, I mean, you're the first person in Iowa basketball history to go 1,000 points, 500 rebounds, 200 steals.
Yep.
And you just say, I mean, what an impressive line. I mean, from an individual standpoint, obviously, you guys had great team success as well. But when you're having both team and personal success, I gotta imagine you start thinking, well, NBA, is that what's next? So talk a little about, that kind of college transition into pros for you.
Yeah, honestly, I really didn't think about the NBA going until probably going into my senior year when Coach Davis called me in. It was a preseason meeting that we had, just talk about expectations and goals and those kind of things. And I got a letter from the Chicago Bulls, and that they'd be watching me and things like that. And, I mean, it is what it is, but I'm like, okay, well, wow, like somebody might think I have pro aspirations, which I really didn't. I mean,
Mm.
I went to Iowa, I was going to get a free education. I was happy. I
Yeah.
was very happy to do that. Um, but it did start to kind of uh, I don't know. I started thinking about it, but it really didn't dominate too much of my thoughts. I was like, we had a really good team. We had a top 10 team coming in. We had Andre Woolridge, Russ Millard, myself, Chris Kingsbury, Jeff Settles. I mean, we had a really, really good team that we felt could go really far if everything worked out for us. So, really the pro thing wasn't something until after my senior year when I talked to Coach Davis and I was like, Coach, I really want to keep playing. And so that's when that all started, and I was able to work it into a couple stints, China, IBL, Sweden, and then my career was cut short for a couple reasons. One, I got hurt and needed ankle surgery my second year. I was playing in Sweden. Played the last month and a half, 2 months with torn ligaments in my ankle and a hairline fracture in my
Mm.
ankle, and really didn't know it, but over there they just taped you up and gave you some pills and you're good to go. Uh,
Uh,
but then I got back to Iowa, looking to do rehab, maybe have surgery, and I met my wife, and that was June of '98, and we were engaged by August and married by September of '99, and had Kris and Keegan August of 2000. So the basketball career really was done when I met their mom, and I think I was ready in some ways to transition. I didn't know if I
yeah.
wanted to keep playing, but I really wanted to coach, and really coaching was one of the first positions I got after I hung up my shoes. And so yeah, the pro thing for me it wasn't long, it wasn't great, but I also feel like that journey helped prepare me for where my kids are today. I think some of the things that I did well, some of the things I didn't do well, I made sure that in training them that I would hopefully fill those gaps so they could reach whatever level they wanted. But yeah, it was interesting for me, but it was a really short professional career.
Well, so you bring up the kids and what it was Coach Taylor, right? Your high school coach?
Coach Turner, Coach Turner.
Turner, sorry, Coach Turner.
Yeah.
Coach Turner. And you mentioned something there, and I think this is a great time to dive into it. And that was sometimes Coach Turner would push you further, maybe than what you even saw or recognized possible. And I can only imagine the interesting dynamic it is as a parent, right? Where it's like, man, I know, everything, all the doors and opportunities basketball gave me, like I would like my kids to have that. And at the same token, you and I both know if the kid doesn't have a burning desire or love for it, burnout and resentment's going to set
Mhm.
in at some point.
Mhm.
So, for you as you enter into, fatherhood and, raising the kids, what was kind of your balancing act there of like, man, I know what it takes to be, an elite player, So I want to push you and help you get the opportunity to be an elite player, all the while, allowing them to really step into it, when their time was ready and as they saw, yeah, this is something I want to be passionate about.
Hmm. Yeah, my wife and I, we discussed this a lot, right? But we have videos when we bought them a little Tykes hoop and they were right around 12 months old,
Yeah.
and you could see Kris taking the ball and just kind of dunking it in the hoop, and then you saw Keegan like 5 feet away launching jumpers at 12 months old. So we're and I was coaching at Indian Hills Community College at the time,
Yeah.
so they were always around the game. The players were always around. We were always watching film, that kind of stuff with them. But we really wanted them to be well-rounded. So
Mm.
even as they were growing, they did everything. They played soccer, baseball, flag football, and basketball. And we really wanted them to make the decision of where this was going to take them, because my wife, I mean, they were really good baseball players. They're both left-handed. I mean, you can imagine they're 6'8",
Yeah.
6'9"
Yeah.
now, left-handers. But they were really, really good in baseball. But it got to a point where we're playing travel baseball, travel basketball. And once you get into the spring and summer, there's a lot of conflicts, right?
Right.
And right around seventh grade, eighth grade is when the boys are like, we're done playing baseball. We want to focus on basketball. And that's really when a lot of I guess, the more specific training started. I started coaching them in fourth grade, started my own AAU program just
Yeah.
because I felt like the programs that were out there weren't teaching the things that I felt they needed
Mm.
as a foundational base. It was all about winning and, trying to recruit and put the best players on one team. And if you saw our team, I was talking to my daughter the other day. I was like, I think fourth grade through high school, we might have won
Wow.
maybe six, but it wasn't a lot. But what we were trying to do was build a foundation where all these kids that were playing in our program got better. And
Yeah.
we were able to develop a lot of really good players. And obviously with that, it was just a foundation of fundamentals. So for Kris and Keegan, it was like, okay, I wasn't a great ball handler. I was a slasher. I could get where I needed to go, but I wasn't a great ball handler. I wasn't a great passer. I wasn't a great shooter. I was a scorer. So I schooled myself in, how do I teach this? How do I teach shooting? How do I teach footwork? And that was a big part of what our program was about. So we practiced for 2 hours, and an hour of it was skill development, working on concepts, high basketball IQ things. And people really didn't like us because we had this team. Nobody's too big. A lot of times it
Yeah.
was a team from Iowa. Sometimes the only black kids on the team were mine. And so
Yeah.
we'd go into Chicago or wherever and play. And we play really good basketball because they could dribble, pass, and shoot. We
Hmm.
had a tremendously tough team. We might have been small, but we were tough. And so one thing I always told the parents on was like, it's not about how many games we win. It's, did we get better this week to next week?
Yep.
And as they saw that, it's like, okay. And so that's how we were able to really have success and get kids to buy into what we were doing with legacy basketball, is how we were teaching them. And that was so much different than when we grew up. I mean, I played, I think we had regional AAU events, we had the state event, and then after that, you went to AAU nationals, and then you
Yep.
played in team camps all summer, right? You're playing with your high school team. There was like no
Yep.
travel AAU. So a lot different. I was joking with the boys one summer. I think we finished fourth in the country at Gym Rat Nationals. And I was like, man, you guys won more games this summer, spring and summer, than I played all of my AAU career. So, times are changing, and we
Yeah.
continue to see how youth sports is growing. But yeah, that's what we did. And when they made that decision, I said, listen, if we're going to do this, you commit to 45 minutes with me of whatever I want to do. We're
Hmm.
doing that. And then after that, you can do whatever you want in the gym. And we usually leave 2 hours later because they'd be playing against each other. They have a built-in one-on-one partner. They were always pushing
Yeah.
each other. So having a twin, there's a lot of perks to it. There's some drawbacks, but
Yep.
there's a lot of perks to that. And the boys really took control of their journey and just allowed me the opportunity to coach them the way I knew they needed to be coached and teach them the way I knew they needed to be taught in order to reach the level that I mean, I didn't think this. We were just hoping they got scholarships to go to college and get a free education too. But their path and their journey has been blessed, but it doesn't come with doesn't come without a lot of hard work and commitment and actually sacrifice that the boys put into it to be where they are.
Absolutely. Now, this might be served as better once we talk a little bit about where the boys are at today. But I'm going to ask you here because you talked a little bit about, pros and cons of being a twin. But I also think, as a parent, you guys have four kids, and not everyone is a pro athlete.
Right.
And so, there's organically more attention that goes to certain kiddos, and yet here you are, and you're called to be a parent, and that means hey, I gotta love each of you. And it's not that you don't love them because of what, or you love them because of what they do, or you don't love them because of what they haven't accomplished. But there's natural spotlights that are on two of your kids because they're in the NBA. And then there's other kids that, like we talked about, one of your daughters going to college. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
just not going to have as much of a spotlight when you're attending college versus being in the NBA. So for you and your wife, how do you kind of balance that as parents, managing each kiddo, knowing they're all different, they all have different needs, but they're also getting different levels of, outside praise and criticism, depending on their phase of life.
Yeah, I mean, Demetrius, our oldest, came to live with us. He was a kid that I coached as a freshman, and he didn't have the easiest home life, and so he came to live with us when he was 17, and we helped him obviously academically, and he went on to play and star at College here in Cedar Rapids and broke all kinds of receiving records. And I think for him it was just giving him the opportunity to have success. And no one in his family had ever gone to college. He goes to college. Not only does he go to college and gets a degree, gets a master's degree, and now he's a teacher and coach at Iowa City West High School. And so you look at that success. And so, there's that time where he's going through the athletic part, and there's certain things that we have to commit to as parents as
Yeah.
well. And then you look at Kris and Keegan, their journey to Iowa and to the NBA. They're super humble kids. They don't, if you come across them, you wouldn't think that they're NBA guys. They don't look the part from a standpoint other than their height. They don't look the part. They're very, very humble kids, very minimal kids. You won't see them flashing hundreds of thousands of dollars of jewelry or a super fancy car. Like they're from Iowa, they're Midwest. They roll the way we roll. I mean,
Yeah.
Keegan walking through the drip cam one time last year was wearing his Iowa Barnstormers AAU shorts and some white socks and UGG slippers and a sweatshirt. I mean, like
Yeah.
that's just how they roll. And then our daughter, she's pretty special in her own right. She, like I said, she academically she's phenomenal. She's going into school as a sophomore already, 4.2 grade point average. I mean, just and a very successful athlete in her own right. She was a volleyball, softball, basketball player. Because of some injuries and things like that with her feet, she had to give up softball and just concentrate on volleyball and basketball. And I can count on these two hands how many times I worked her out to get her prepared to play college basketball. She was just like, no, I like to play, I like to compete. My body's to a point, she said in high school, she really made the decision probably sophomore year where she's like, I'm not gonna play sports after college. So and that was great. I mean, you think about it, frees up time that we
Yeah.
don't have to be on the road doing things for AAU. But yeah, all kids and as parents, it's been, it's been a journey because you're right, they're all different. And you've seen it time and time again. Kids raised in the same house turn out different.
Yeah.
But there's also the change in parenting, right? I mean, you parent a 29-year-old in Demetrius different than you parent a 24-year-old, different than you parent an 18-year-old. And
Yeah.
so getting them to understand that we don't parent all of you the same way because you're in different chapters of your life. But there's also times where we need to uh, give this kiddo a little bit more attention. And that happened. We had an instance. I'll tell you about this. We had an instance when Keegan was drafted. He's playing for Sacramento. Kris is still at Iowa, and we got McKenna at home. And we just felt some things were off
Yeah.
with Kris, and the communication wasn't great. And what it was he felt like Keegan's basketball was more important, or McKenna's
Mhm.
this was more important, or Demetrius, was more important. Demetrius at the time they were expecting a baby, him and his
Yeah.
fiance, and so it's like okay, like there's all these different things going on, and how I explain it to Kris is it's not about we love you more or what you're doing is less important than this, but there are times when your brother just moved across the country. He's out there by himself with his girlfriend. He needs us a little bit more in this
Yeah.
new NBA world that we have no idea about and we're learning about. Demetrius and Maddie, they're going to have a baby in January, Kris. Like they need us in this respect. And it's McKenna's senior year. So you got homecoming, all these other things. And I go, but think about it. I go, you go through your season at Iowa, come April through July, it's all about you when it comes
Yeah.
to your preparation for the NBA draft, getting drafted in June, then going to NBA Summer League in July. Like that span is about you. So it's not that we feel one is more important than the other. It's just where you guys need us at different times. And I
Yeah.
think once we had that kind of conversation, he understood, like, okay, that makes sense. But, it's one of those things where we've learned that transparency, communication. You can't over communicate, even though your kids may be super smart and you
Yep.
think that they get it. There's still emotion that comes into it that just cancels everything out. So yeah, so it's been a different road for us, and we know becoming empty nesters will be another challenge as well. Especially my wife is kind of figuring out that the whole mom thing changes when you got fiancés and girlfriends and all that kind of stuff. It changes. So
Yeah.
she's been working through that part of it as well. But it is parenting is challenging when you have multiple kids and trying to make sure that they all feel important and loved. And so for us, it's just making sure we stay open with our communication. But we've had some snags, we've had some bumps. There's been some hurt feelings based on all this kind of stuff. But what family doesn't have them, and you just learn and have to work through
Yep, I love it. Yeah, I mean, being able to have the conversations and also just being aware. I mean, the fact that you guys realize, hey, just even the communication patterns a little bit off, and that can open up the door for the dialogue. So
them.
I love it.
Absolutely.
Now, for Kris and Keegan, going into their senior year, they weren't Mr. Basketball of Iowa. They weren't necessarily getting the top offers from Michigan State, Michigan, Kentucky. You guys thought, hey, it might be a college route that you could get scholarships. It's just probably not going to be at the Division I level, but you guys executively decide, hey, a fifth year, prep academy is going to be the best option. So talk a little about, going into that, hey, the prep academy, what you were hoping, could come from it, versus where you were at that point.
Well, the Keegan and Kris will tell you right now that when I said, "Hey, we're going down to visit DME Prep," and they're like, "Where's it at? What's it about?" And they said they were talking on the way down, like, "We are not going to prep school. There's no way we're going to go to Florida." They were
Mm.
like, "We'll stay in Iowa, go to a JUCO, figure it out after that, right?"
Yeah.
Because they only had the one offer from Western Illinois coming out. So they went there and knew like they could play at a higher level. So I think they believed that a year, whether it's JUCO, maybe prep, would help them. And
Mm.
it was just really interesting because at that time, really had started my own personal spiritual journey.
Yeah.
And there was just something that pulled me there. There was just, I had got a phone call from a coach and said, "Hey, I know this coach here." And just to follow up with something that somebody just threw your way is kind of like, do I really want to make the phone call? But once we got there, realized that the prep school was founded by the Panaggio family. So Mike Panaggio and Dan Panaggio, who Dan was actually the coach for the CBA Quad
Mm.
City Thunder, and he drafted me out of Iowa to the CBA. And Dan went on to win championships in the CBA. He won a championship with the Lakers with that Kobe Bryant, Pau Gasol team.
Yeah.
And, he was actually the one that worked Kris and Keegan out. So I'm like, man, that's kind of crazy, right? That we got this. And so we did some touring and we got back and I just told my wife, like, they need this from
Mm.
the nutrition and meal plan, the coaching, the weightlifting, like they just need this. So how do we
Yeah.
figure it out? And that was the biggest thing. Coming back, we sat down and had a family meeting, and I said, "This is going to be the maybe the one and only time I tell you you're going to do something." So
Yeah.
it was definitely an executive decision by Michelle and I to tell them that they were doing it. And what was great about the time and the timing was that Michelle was working a remote job for the University
Mm.
of Iowa hospitals. And so instead of paying a huge number for room and board, we just got a 3-bedroom apartment, saved some money for 6.5 months, 7 months. And it just worked out great. And honestly, they love that because they encourage families that could potentially have a parent move
Mm.
with child to Florida, they encouraged that because they saw that the one thing that Kris and Keegan had was 3 to 4 square meals a day. Mom was there to help, with the aches and pains and making sure they're getting enough sleep and all that kind of stuff. They don't hang out, they don't party, so that wasn't a big thing. But um, that year was phenomenal for their growth, not only physically but mentally. I think
Mm.
they understood the game, they had the tools, they had to develop physically, but then they had to understand the mental aspects of going from high school to Division 1, and they were able to play under an unbelievable coach, Wissam Al-Sous, who is the head coach for the Jordanian national team.
Uh,
And he saw their talent and potential. He's like, we just got to work from the neck up. And I think that his tutelage there was unbelievable. They took DME to unbelievable heights. And I mean, they played there 1 year and DME retired their jerseys because the boys really helped them reach a level that they'd never reached as a national ranked team, getting to the national tournament, all those kind of things. And so it obviously was a great thing for them to do, but they'll tell you to this day they did not want to go. So
I love it. And
uh,
then they end up following in Dad's footsteps after that year and head to Iowa, which I'm sure was great to have them back home and much easier to be able to attend at least half the games every year.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, it was awesome. We joke about it like you had to go all the way to Florida to come back to Iowa to play. But the recruiting was crazy because Fran had targeted them a little bit like post high school because they played an all-star game with Patrick. And Patrick was like, man, Dad, I really like the twins. I feel like, they could be good examples. So that's when Fran was like, hey, you really need to consider the prep school route. And so that's really kind of where I really ramped up, learning more and more about prep schools. I talked about 4 or 5 different ones, and obviously we landed there. But the recruiting process was great because they started in September. October they have the showcase, and it was in Orlando. And junior colleges, prep schools, they were all in the showcase. And Kris and Keegan really stood out. And Coach Kirk Sparrow was at the showcase event, and they were turning heads. So the event was like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday event. Um, Coach leaves, I leave, my daughter leave. We go come back to Iowa because we watched them play. My wife calls me like, "Hey, we're coming back to Iowa." I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Well, Iowa just booked us a flight." So I get a call from Iowa like, "Here, we're bringing the boys up." They land on Thursday, get to campus on Friday, um, have dinner and all that kind of stuff. Fran offers them on Friday, both of them. They have their Saturday, Sunday, the boys commit. So they go, so from Sunday when the showcase ended to the other Sunday, so 7 day span, they go from no offers to committed to the University of Iowa. And
Wow.
they both said coming up, if Iowa offers us both, we're committing. And so
Cool.
I didn't know that. My wife didn't know that. My wife was like, don't you guys want to visit some other schools? Like, because there was like 40 schools, 40, 45 schools called that Monday
Wow.
about them. And so I know their head coach said he was on the phone for like 4 hours that day. Uh, and they said, nope, nope. We get to come home 20 minutes, 25 minutes from campus. It just all worked out. And obviously there was a lot of things coming into it. Oh, the only reason Fran signed them was because of legacy players and only because of Kenyon and they should be walk-ons. And so, I knew what their potential was. Fran knew what their potential was. It was everybody else that were like, well, they weren't really good high school players. They were, but there was a lot of other players that had more notoriety and stuff like that. So it was one of those things where I didn't say the boys felt slighted,
Yeah.
but they realized that they had a chance to really make a name for themselves. And what never changed was their work ethic.
Yeah.
They kept the same work ethic. They didn't go out. They would go to the gym at 11 at night to get shots up, and things like that. So it was a wild and whirlwind, I would say, courtship to get them here. But yeah, span of a week, they were signed, sealed, ready to go. So
I love it. Well, then you think about both of their journeys through college, and if we had another hour, we'd go through that. But I mean, you just think about that from senior year to really, not having many offers or maybe one Division 1 offer,
yeah,
to then what 2 years, 3 years later, back-to-back years of draft picks in the NBA. I mean, you just go, wow. And I think that
Yeah.
speaks to, what you were talking about earlier, the mental growth, right? I mean, the physical side is certainly part of it, but the other side is, man, you really got to be sharp and you got to be pristine and you got to be humble but hungry, when you're working hard and trying to get that rapid growth.
Yeah, it is. And I think, the physical things come. They actually grew. They were like 6'7" in high school, 6'8", got to Iowa. I think they're a touch under 6'9" now. They both have put on 40 pounds. And, that's 2019 when they graduated high school. So in 5 years, they both put on 40 pounds. And I think the way they play the game, the way they understand the game is tremendous. Obviously Keegan had a phenomenal year as a first team All American and those kind of things, a top 5 pick. And then Kris thought about leaving. I mean, he went through the process, and my wife was probably pushing him for him to leave as well. But he said, no, I'm going to go back. And what's interesting is their agent, Mark Bartelstein, said most people think the ultimate sign for a basketball player who says they're going to bet on themselves is leaving college and going to the pros. I'm gonna bet on myself to make it. He said, he goes, the ultimate bet on yourself is what Kris did, knowing that you have to, if you go back, you're going to be compared to your brother
Yep.
every game, every output. And he's like, okay, I'm ready to be the first. I'm ready to be on the top of the scouting report.
Yep.
And the fact that he came back and was a third team All American, first team All Big Ten player, I mean, the first 30-20 game in Iowa history, I think the last one was in like the 70s, and really just solidified himself. So it goes to show that, yeah, being a twin is really good. I think it helped them reach the success that they've had, but it also can be a deterrent because now you're going to be compared to your brother, and Kris just played his way. He always has. And, I think their situation is a little bit different now in the pros, but I have no doubt that Kris will continue to develop and, they're very different players.
Yep.
Keegan has always wanted to put the ball in the hoop, had to learn how to play defense, couldn't
Yep.
get him to play defense probably till his senior year in high school. And and now, he's probably looking at maybe being, a first team, second team all defensive player. But for Kris is more of I really compared him to like a Lamar Odom. He's got a
Mm.
certain skill set where he can rebound, defend, he can pass, he can shoot the ball a little bit. So he's got more of I call him a connector. He's got more of a
Yeah.
connector game. Keegan is more of a finisher. He's got more of a finisher game, especially when you talk about offensively. So yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what happens in the pros, but I know who they are, what they are, how they're built. They won't cut corners, and you'll see them both. I feel and know that they'll have very successful careers. So
I love it. Well, in addition to that, you've transitioned from doing college coaching and now you're doing some kind of personal development and professional coaching. Talk a little bit about that. And I think you've partnered up with Ryan Leak and his program. So, talk a little bit about how that connect came to be and what you're doing there. And then also talk a little bit about the nonprofit and the good you guys are doing there.
yeah, so my wife will tell you that I drove her nuts about this for so many years. I always felt, okay, coming out, I want to be a coach. I take my first job at Indian Hills. Uh, but in trying to reach that Division I level, I also found out that it's not always that glamorous, especially when
Mm.
you're a D1 coach and you have kids, you're away from your family. There's a lot of strain there. So I did go into corporate world. Uh, I was a pharmaceutical rep. I spent most of my professional career as a dental sales rep here in Iowa, and I always was feeling like, this isn't my passion. This isn't what I'm supposed to
Mm.
do. I'm supposed to be coaching. But what ended up happening was I know that our family wouldn't be where they are today if it wasn't for this very, very dark part of our story. My
Mm.
story was when my wife told me she was leaving me,
Mm.
and so um, that started me down the path. Okay, what am I trying to accomplish with this life? What am I trying to accomplish as a husband, a father, a friend, a son, whatever it is? And
Yeah.
so I started my spiritual journey. And so where I am today is a direct result of that spiritual journey. Really looking in the mirror, seeing where my flaws were, things that I struggle with, how much buried trauma I had that I had to dig up and really deal with. in order to become a better version, a truer version of who God saw me or knew who I could become. I just had to see it for myself. And so,
Yeah.
so for me, it's just been that journey has opened so many doors when you talk about just the people I've connected with, where you talk about Ryan Leak or Jordan Montgomery or, Mark Wise or whoever it is. This journey has led me to friendships that have really helped me grow.
Hmm.
And partnering with Jordan Montgomery was one of the best things I did because it opened me up to people like Ryan Leak, who are people that are trying to help other people become the best version of themselves, whether it's through business,
Yeah.
education, leadership, those kind of things. And so I really have been, I wouldn't even say pushed. I have been led, I feel, to this position of mentorship and leadership development, personal growth where now I'm partnered with a great organization here in Cedar Rapids called Covenant Workplace Solutions. We, as a company, provide employee assistance programs, and part of that program is life coaching. And getting certified and going through that, it's been kind of crazy and fun because I've learned a lot more about myself.
Yeah.
But I also feel like there's a lot of people that have gone through some of the same things I've gone through or looking maybe for some of the same things I was looking for. And my transparency and being honest and those kind of things have really allowed me to connect with people, whether it's professionally, socially, or whatever. And so I'm really excited about just where it's going because now in a day where mental health, mental wellness is something that we talk about, and it's ingrained in our society now. There's a gap. There's a gap when it comes to people that are in need getting to that specific service they need, whether it's counseling, treatment, those kind of things. And as a life coach, all we don't try to, you know, diagnose or anything like that. We try to give people tools that will help them reach certain goals that they've set for themselves as a add-on to maybe their potential of needing, actual, medical counsel and those kind of things. So for me, it's just an opportunity to share some of the tools that I've been given from so many great leaders and people, people developers in the world. Like it's just been so much fun to sit in this role and realize like sometimes your life story is all somebody needs to hear in order to get that inspiration to think of themselves in a different light, to think that, okay, I can accomplish that. And sometimes it's not even what I do as a life coach, it's just the conversations that I'm having that can inspire people. And I hopefully that'll continue to inspire. And then for kids too, seeing Kris and Keegan's story is like you can be not thought about. You could be the 331st ranked player in the country as a high school and still be a top 10, top 25 pick. So
Yeah.
I think the platform and the story that we have is unbelievable, and we're utilizing that to, you know, uh, give back to our community, create different channels for families and kids. And my wife is a giver, so we're also working to help dogs in Cedar Rapids as well. So, we're touching all kinds of things.
I love it. Well, and so something I'll ask about, as you talked about your journey and where you're at, I think for so many people, they have this large hole that they've been able to fill with accolades and accomplishments. And for a lot of people, that hole doesn't actually get filled up, right? It takes those
Right.
things in, but the hole stays there. So, for you and when your wife brings this up to you, hey, like this just isn't working. What was kind of like, one or two steps you took to start really, figuring out what is this, what is this thing I'm feeling, or what is this void that, I feel like I've got to go accomplish these things, and how'd you navigate that?
Yeah, I think I truly believe that any high performing athlete deals with that or has to
Mm,
deal with that, right? They
yeah,
have to deal with life after their sport or whatever
yeah.
it is. And so for me, it was my counselor had asked me this question. He said, "What do you want out of this life?"
Mm,
And I sat there, my wife was sitting next to me, and I sat there and I closed my eyes and I'm sitting here thinking, and like nothing came to me. And
mm,
in that moment, that was like the biggest punch in the gut and saying, okay, if you, God's telling you, if you continue down this road, all you're going to see is darkness.
mm,
There's nothing good can come of it. And so for me, it was okay. I know I don't have a close relationship with God, and there were things that led to me feeling that way. Um, and so I had to deal with that. I had to figure out what was the thing that was holding me back. And I actually started with a Bible study group. I jokingly call it my old man group because when I showed up, I was like the only black guy and about 20 years younger than everybody else group. And so, but these guys have been my rock since 2018. Even this year, my last game coaching as a high school coach, five of my guys showed up behind the bench, to cheer me on because they knew I was coaching my daughter, possibly the last game. And so for me, it was surrounding myself with people that wanted to help me become a better version of myself, surrounding myself with people that were willing to pour into me, bestow that knowledge. I mean, not not look at me as saying, oh, well, you're a basketball player, you shouldn't deal with this. Like, okay, how can we help? What do you need? And then getting that perspective, right? When you're learning from somebody that's 20, 30 years older than you, like they have a perspective you don't have. So for me, one of the biggest things was really aligning myself with God and really trying to have that close relationship because then what he does is he then puts people in your life that you didn't know. They might have even been right on the periphery, right? But
Yeah.
now it's like, okay, like you've surrendered, you've opened yourself up. Now I'm allow these people
Mm.
into your life because now I feel like you're ready. And
Yeah.
I have just been blessed immeasurably with the people that he's put in my life. And so for me, trying to figure out who I was outside of basketball, outside of Kenyon Murray, the Iowa player, Kenyon Murray, the basketball coach, and really discovering who Kenyon Murray, the man, was meant to be is a big reason why I'm here. But I mean, it's sad. I wouldn't say sad. I would say it's a reality that it came from something really, really dark. But we
Mm.
talk about sometimes the best things in life come out from some of the darkest things. My wife loves the lotus
Yeah.
flower, right? And what is a
Yeah.
lotus flower is very beautiful, right? And it's grown out of what? Mud, mud
Yeah.
gunk. And so I guess in that way, I'm her lotus flower when it comes to that. But yeah, man, I think more than anything now, it's who you surround yourself with.
Mm.
And as a mentor, that's one of the first things I ask, especially young, aspiring entrepreneurs or, getting into the workforce is like, you have to change your environment. If you want to ascend, it's not like you're leaving people behind, but you have to surround yourself with people that understand what you're trying to do and then are able to pour into you and help you on your journey. And it's like I said, it's not a slight on those that have been there, family, those kind of things. But sometimes when you're trying to move a certain way, you have to align yourself with those people. And I really feel like that's what has been happening with me and just the connections that have come out of all of this have been phenomenal. And I tell everybody a lot of times like how appreciative I am of what they've done for me and where I've come. But yeah, man, it all starts with wifey sending me that text, which is we can laugh about it now, but it was
Yeah.
not very funny at the time.
I love it. Well, Kenyon, I want to say thanks so much for sharing your journey and your story, man. And I'm excited to see what you continue to do. And I know we'll probably have to do this again in 2 years and just highlight all the amazing things that you'll do between now and then, my man. So thanks again for sharing your journey.
No, I appreciate it. And thanks for the platform and definitely need to get you on the show now too, because we gotta talk about your Concordia days and how you were a baller there and yeah. So
I'm no Kenyon Murray. Just know that. I'm no Kenyon Murray.
well, I appreciate the time and obviously it was great getting to know you and anything that I can help you with, man, don't hesitate to reach out. But yeah, I'll be giving a call to reciprocate this for sure.